Whatever you do, do it so fully that you are drowning in consciousness and awareness. Do it so fully that you are healing in the depths of your soul to bring your soul purpose into this world. And do it with love. The proverb of loving consciously, of this mission, of this journey: keep awakening, keep healing, and keep loving. That's how we build the new world of love.
When we release that personal I and that ego, we allow God to architect something more magical than we could have ever expected. Okay, God, you clearly have a bigger plan than even what we were holding. And so let's just fully surrender and dive in and see what you have in store.
How do you describe what this journey was?
If I had to distill it down, I would say it was an exodus of death and rebirth to find love again, to find God again, and to heal.
It's love. It's God and it's love. That's all that there is, friends. It's that simple. It's that profound. It's that beautiful. And when we stripped away everything and we saw this entire country and we went through these experiences, there was just nothing in the end other than God. You just have to rely on God, and you have to go with God, and you have to trust God, and you have to be in union with God. And it's all love. Love is the answer. Love is how we get out of this. There's no amount of solutions or money or disclosure or sovereignty that is going to fix this. It's just love.
So much of people's perceptions of the world aren't actually our perceptions. They're what we're told to us. When you boil it down beyond the colors and the political beliefs, everybody here is a child of God. And the media really wants us to live in this state of separation so that we're fighting instead of being present with ourselves and healing and building community and living our purpose.
God will deliver. God uses everything, and God will activate you exactly as you need to be activated for what you're here to do. Look at your life, because your challenges and your lessons, those are your skills. Those are your activations. It's wisdom and life that makes leaders. No matter what you've been through in your life, you have the capacity to change the world.
Imagine a society where everybody's living in their purpose. Just the beauty that can be built from that. I have faith in all of us and what we are going to create together. With God on our side and love in our hearts, there is nothing too dark for us to illuminate with love.
Welcome home to the Loving Consciously podcast. My name is Amaris.
And my name is Eric.
And if you are like us, nobody taught you how to love. We are best friends and life partners here to vulnerably and authentically share our journey while exploring the sacred realms of love, consciousness, relationships, spirituality, and all that they encompass.
The intention of this show is to help you consciously relate to yourself, others, and everything else in this universe. Together, we can embody a more intentional and fulfilling way of giving and receiving love.
Loving consciously. Through 8 years together, we have had the opportunity to overcome deep patterning and programming, as well as trauma related to mental health, addiction, pregnancy loss, infidelity, and immense grief. After 6 years of experiencing these challenges with no knowledge on how to heal or love each other, we separated.
After us both spiritually awakening and recommitting, we formed our conscious partnership and have spent the last 2 years cultivating a divine union founded on unconditional love, devotion, and commitment to personal growth.
Thank you for joining us and doing the work alongside us as we explore this beautiful world of love and consciousness to co-create a new world of love.
As you courageously walk this path, remember to have grace with yourself and know that you have both the capacity to love consciously and the power to always choose love.
Blessed day and welcome back to the Loving Consciously podcast. We are so excited to be back after a few weeks and to give you what we promise is the third and final part of our RV Exodus, a revelation of love and God. Before we get into today's content, just a couple of personal updates, checking in here. We are still integrating from the last 2 months that we have had between the Bitcoin conference and Confluence and Costa Rica, and now most recently 10 days with your parents here visiting us for the first time in Austin. We are having a very busy and active summer and just really taking this couple of weeks before we go to Portugal for 11 days to really ground in and try and integrate these last couple of months, because the next 2 months of summer are going to be just as wild.
Yeah, it's been a really beautiful and fast-paced experience. Even though our home isn't moving, we have been certainly continuing that journey of traveling and moving ourselves. And so we're in this pattern of rapid exposure and healing and connections, and it's been just a really wild and beautiful journey.
I've been reflecting a lot on, just the fact that we've been living in Austin for over 6 months now, and that I spent the first 6 years of this relationship, with no contact with your parents. And now they're just casually here visiting us for 10 days and spending that time with them and going really deep spiritually and, being able to be our authentic selves and be received, and the openness and receptivity on their part to our lifestyle and, this kind of more spiritual world that we live in was really special. I would be remiss if I didn't mention I finished my bachelor's and my ministry degrees, and so those have been submitted for review. I should have them awarded sometime in the next few weeks, and I already started my master's, so I'm now in my master's, and yeah, just been doing a lot of school and a lot of resting and a lot of family time. And I don't know if you have anything else you want to add before we get into this content.
I mean, just a little bit of gratitude, I think, for where we are in our journey now. Because, like you said, looking back at where everything started and the relationships that we had with our family and with each other, I'm really in the state of gratitude looking at the fact that we can spend 10 days with my family coming and visiting and being in a state of love and grace and having very vulnerable and difficult conversations and being able to maintain our authenticity and have that be received is not is not something that goes over my head easily. And so a lot of gratitude for God's work in that experience and family healing, and then also just really proud of you and what you've been able to accomplish, even with being on the road, even with the immense amount of healing and traveling that we've been doing. Schoolwork has been a priority for you, and it's been part of the mission. So I'm really proud of you for getting your ministerial and getting your bachelor's and very quickly shifting over into your master's.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I love that you brought up gratitude, because I really want this moment to be a testament, especially if you followed our journey, and even if you're new here, to show you the power of love and the power of healing, because we literally had no contact with your parents for the better part of 6 years, no relationship at all. And now we have photos of us laughing and, floating down the river here in Austin. And it really just goes to show, when you deeply do that healing work and you're committed to love, what is possible. You're right. It was very quick. I did my bachelor's in less than 6 months, which is pretty wild and intense in true me fashion. And then I submitted it, and the next day started my master's. So one thing I did want to mention in here, and we're going to save it for when we get to Asheville, is we do want to take some space in this episode to acknowledge what's happening right here in our backyard. There are these historic, once in a lifetime floods happening 30 minutes an hour from where we are, just south of Austin. And so we have been feeling that this weekend. We have been very present with that. We have been stuck in the house for days with rain and fireworks and the puppies, being scared from that, and really just holding this awareness of what is going on here in Texas. And so we'll touch on that a little bit when we get to the Asheville section, when we talk about that hurricane and that experience. But once again, finding ourselves in this energetic place of holding space and light and prayer and intention for a really catastrophic event, and how that affects the land, how that affects the grids, how that affects the collective in the area. So we'll get more into that. So where we left off last time, we were a fifth of the way through the states, halfway through the national parks, because remember, half the national parks are in just like 8 states on the west, and halfway through this 13-month journey. we left off in that exodus across Nevada and landed in Northern California. And there's a really powerful moment of crossing the San Bernardino Pass. And we really want to shout out episode 28 here and encourage you to go listen to this, because pretty much from having that amazing first 6 months, no breakdowns, no accidents, divinely guided, beautiful flow state, and then in a month period, I break my foot. We have a massive breakdown. We have that incident in the Utah desert. We have the Mormon crickets. We have the San Bernardino Pass. It was such an intense month of challenges and opportunities to choose love. And we were just really being tested and prepared for what was to come. And so really want to encourage you. Episode 28 goes deep into that specific time period of just challenge after challenge after challenge, and really showing the other side of this, that the path of choosing love is not always light, right? It's not always easy. Our joke is, it's not light work, but it is light work. And that episode is a really great testament to that.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to grab any portion of this journey and have it be synonymous with the Exodus in the Bible, this was that for us. We were literally crossing the desert back to California and just experienced catalyst after catalyst after catalyst. And looking back at it, God was really forging us into the people that we are today, not only as individuals, but in our partnership as well. Really breaking down how our dynamic was in its current state and encouraging us to be more in touch with our feminine and masculine energies and really rely on God and be in a state of surrender and faith, and just really not give up, because there's so many points in that segment of the journey where it would have been really, really, really easy to give up. I would urge you, if you are in a challenging moment in a catalytic experience right now, go check out episode 28. It has a lot of incredible content around how we overcame these situations, focusing on God, relying on each other, and just allowing love to lead the way.
Definitely. So we make it to Northern California. We are back where we started, very synchronistic, and we are at Music and Sky, which is a truth, love, freedom community festival, if I had to distill it down. And we are also there to do some land showings. And again, shouting out another episode here. If you want to learn more about this, you can listen to episode 22, Love is a Sanctuary. But in essence, we make it to this festival, this event, and it was another stark moment, just like Confluence last year, which we touched on in our last episode, where we realized how profoundly out of the system and out of the matrix, if you will, we were existing. And these are the most sovereign and conscious and truth freedom people in the country. And we're even more removed than that, because we literally are completely free on a sabbatical, out in the open with everything we own. And that way of life had really started to become our new normal. And so just recognizing again, as we integrate into this event with hundreds and hundreds of people, realizing everyone here, albeit sovereign and free and in this movement, are still a part of the system. And we've completely exited that. And so it was just this interesting dichotomy of just realizing how much we were unbecoming what everyone else lives in. And going through this event, it was so hot. We ended up having to go emergency rent a generator, because here we are with our house and our dogs, and it's really hot, heat wave, and my foot, I'm in a boot. And so it was a really intense experience, but it was really beautiful to come with our authentic selves and our vision and share this RV journey and be received with such love and interest in what we were envisioning.
Yes, and the growth that we displayed from Confluence to Music in the Sky was profound, even for me looking back, and to see where we had kind of plugged into Confluence as almost like an outsider and observing this community. By the time we got to Music and Sky, going through the catalysts of the desert, we were firm in who we were. Our vision for what we were building and where God was leading us was crystal clear. And the ability for us to really step into leadership and articulate that was leagues above where we were at even just months ago. And so it really goes to show how these catalysts are what God uses to forge us into who we're becoming. And you made a really important point there too, in that these festivals are great micro catalysts and experiences for people to come into community together and experience what an alternative way of living might be for a couple days or a week. In this experience, we realized, oh, this isn't part-time for us. Our sovereignty is embodied. We are living this now. And it was a flip of the switch for me to really understand, okay, our old way of life is no longer our life. We are now living in this way, and we're paving a new experience for our life.
Yeah, you touched on two things there. The first one being this like forged by fire. I cannot stress enough. One of the most common questions humanity asks is like, why is there suffering? Suffering is a choice. That's the resistance to what's happening. So the more helpful question is, why is there challenges? Our souls would not grow and evolve if there was not friction and challenges to keep us moving and keep us from being in a state of complacency and comfort. We are a testament 1,000 times over this last 9 years to the power of leaning into those challenging times and welcoming them with gratitude and grace and seeing what's in them for you. And to your second point about sovereignty being embodied, not saying anyone else's sovereignty is not embodied. However, there's a level of having full resource, time, money, and spatial sovereignty. When you live in an RV and you have no bills, no mortgage, no matrix job, we owned our own business, we're doing crypto and different things, like we truly had taken our power back and we had the freedom to go wherever, whenever, and really embody this free lifestyle in a profound way. Yeah, going through this event, it just really was clear to us and a lot of the people there in our community that we were really stepping into this embodiment and getting crystal clear on this vision, which leads perfectly into the land showings. And, we had talked about this at varying points in this, but we really kept this close to our heart. Something I've contemplated a lot is, what is the line between being radically transparent and sharing our whole lives and saving some things for ourselves as we really deeply, go through it and get the alchemical magic and integrate it and let it come to fruition before we share. And so, like this rebrand, that's been something we've been kind of really keeping quiet and close to our chest. This land journey, we kind of were really vague about on the show and then just didn't talk about it for this last year. And it feels time to talk about it. And I guess to just keep it really simple, because it was really simple, though it was really profound. At the start of our journey, we absolutely fell in love with a piece of land in Northern California. It was 320 acres, a mile of riverfront, already had structures, already was off-grid, surrounded by national forest land. It could not have been more perfect. And we actually flew out to see it once, and then this was now our second time visiting it. And we were talking with the owners and talking with the agents and going through this process, and they knew our situation with crypto and all these different things, and really invested, and randomly got a text one day that they had accepted an on-the-spot cash offer. And, there were no other interested buyers. It had been on the market for years. And I guess some guy just had come up and decided to make a cash offer on the spot. And though the owners said that they wanted it to go to our vision for this community and this sanctuary we were going to build, they chose the money. And that is a valid choice for them. That's what they chose to do. And in hindsight, looking back a year later, we've realized, especially through witnessing a friend go through something similar, that had we gone that journey of, owner financing and liquidating crypto early and making payments and things, it would have been a much more stressful situation. And we've come to understand spiritually that that land, and really specifically California, is not quite ready for what we personally were bringing there. And so we still have that land in our hearts and every intention to someday steward that land. It just was perfectly designed, and it really comes to show God knows what's best, and divine will knows what the highest timeline is. And our human selves, we get really attached, or we want it now, right? We want this land, we want it now. And it was just really, really beautiful and painful lessons in trusting God's plan, and in trusting the land, and when she's ready, and trusting us that we had a lot of activations that weren't ready, and had we gotten that land, we would not have finished the journey. And as you're going to see in the rest of this episode, the things that came of that absolutely needed to happen. We leveled up light years ahead of where we were at this point after just 6 months. And so it was a really beautiful, challenging, sacred journey of finding, loving, and quote unquote losing this land, though it was never ours to lose, right? We were just there to steward it, and that just wasn't time yet.
Yeah, it was a really big lesson on, again, surrender and releasing the personal I, because I absolutely fell in love with that land and was already seeing the visions of what could be on there. We had a community together, we had momentum and purpose and drive, and then from one day to the next, that land was no longer available. And God really asked me personally, it's like, is the land the vision, or can the vision exist without the land? And it was a really big activation around allowing where God is leading us to be a vision in our soul and our mind's eye, and not attached to something on this 3D plane. Because when we are attached to the way it looks or the way that it's going to plan out, then we limit God. We limit where we are being led. When we release that personal I and that ego, we allow God to architect something more magical than we could have ever expected.
It's so true. Surrender, surrender. So we're back where we started. We have this festival. We see this land. We are just swimming and basking in all of this really profound visioning, and really opening ourselves up to leadership and prophecy and what God is putting in our hearts, because this is so much more than the vision everyone gets of like, oh, let's go get some land and build a community. Eric and I are holding much bigger visions than that, and they are really powerful, and that requires a really intense foundation and activations into leadership and being able to hold space for that. So we drive back to Portland. So we're really back where we started now. And I don't even know how to describe it, this experience of, most people will never experience this in their lifetime, but to dismantle your entire life, leave what was our hometown at that point, for almost 5 years, sell everything you own, go out for 6 months, see, a quarter of this country and experience what we experienced, and then go back and return, quote unquote, to what was our home. It was really, really interesting because it wasn't our home anymore. And we didn't really want to be there anymore. Like, we had grown more in 6 months than most people do in a lifetime. And then trying to come back into this old container, it felt, I'm literally like hunching my shoulders and curling in. Like, for me, it felt so restrictive. I'd found so much freedom and so much space. I'd made so much space. I had grown my capacity for more. And so we love Portland, and that no longer satisfied this container. That was no longer our dream. That was our post-college dream, and we lived it, and it was what it was. But going back, we realized, this is not our spot, and we need to keep going. And so we called this like our minor decision point, and we decided to do another chunk until we had to make a major decision point. And so we drove up to Washington and did 2 weeks there, which I don't have any other word than magical. Beautiful. The national parks there, the nature there. This was like July. So we're there in July. It's just absolutely beautiful. And, we go up and see Vancouver, and we see the national parks, the mountains, the forests, the rivers, the ocean. It's all there. It's all beautiful. And we day drive through Idaho because we've already spent a good amount of time there outside of this journey. And we land in Montana. And Montana was very interesting because I think Montana was the turning point where we both started to realize God has very powerful things in this journey for us that we are not seeing yet. And what I mean by that is as you walk your life, in the moment, you think that you know why things are happening. And then you look back and you realize, oh, there was more to that. And that's the whole concept of revelation, right? Like there are layers and layers and layers to what we experience. I have been out of prison for 9 years, and that journey is still revealing itself to me, in my ministry journey. And so just really started to see through some very powerful connections and very interesting experiences, oh, God is brewing something here. This is more than just a healing journey for us. This is more than just a sovereignty journey. This is more than just experiencing the world. There is something being built here in the fabric of making connections in every state and seeing these different communities and preparing us for leadership. And that is still revealing itself. I still don't fully know why God had this journey and plan. I do know we know people in almost every state now, and we know where all the communities are. We know where all the springs are. And I'm not saying that's like a doomsday prep or what it is. God has a plan in this. And someday, probably multiple ways, that is going to be a powerful tool and gift in our pocket to have seen this entire country. And so Montana was beautiful and was just this really big turning point of like, oh, there's more here than I think we're even realizing.
Yeah, I mean, this whole journey has been an incredibly intricate and beautiful master plan of God's art. And this was the point where I started seeing that beyond just the excitement and the change and the growth that was occurring. It really zoomed out into something much bigger, and seeing the network that we were starting to build, being able to travel physically, whereas a lot of the people who were coming to festivals were coming and creating network in this individual container and then going back to their lives. We were out laying down the foundation, laying down the train tracks as a metaphor of this mycelium network of people who are conscious, people who are waking up, people who are trying to live an alternative lifestyle and are doing so in isolation.
Yeah, it touches on something really important about how the journey shifted. Of prior to this, we were really on our own in RV parks, in state parks, going to events, just really focused on us and our healing and integrating into this life and all of these activations. And this was the turning point of realizing, oh, we need to start staying at more communities. We need to start staying at more farms and getting into we the people and meeting the people and the infrastructure and the grid work. So it really was like the first half of the journey was a little bit more about like us and our healing and our experiences. And the second half was much more about, okay, leadership and activations and making connections and staying with these communities.
That was a big turning point too with the land. When we decided to keep going, once the land fell through in that capacity, it was a really big act of, okay, God, you clearly have a bigger plan than even what we were holding. And so let's just fully surrender and dive in and see what you have in store. And this whole next leg of the journey was that unfolding.
Yeah. So after Montana, we go to Wyoming. We live off grid for a week in Yellowstone in our house. That was an epic experience. Yellowstone is as magical as they say. And though it is commercialized and busy, you cannot tell like you can in some of the California parks. Absolutely beautiful. And that was the moment. And I remember we had the conversation where our freedom was fully integrated. Like we had fully integrated and embodied our freedom, and that we, from this moment forward in our lives, could surrender fully to God and walk this journey and had no idea what it looked like, and it didn't matter because we were on faith and we were walking with God. And so after Yellowstone, we spend a week through North Dakota and South Dakota, the Black Hills, absolutely incredibly sacred land. And, it was really interesting. Like, we go to Mount Rushmore, and I'll be honest, I'm like literally have a sour taste in my mouth. Like, to see the way that they, defiled this sacred mountain in this very sacred ancient tribal place, it was a really interesting meeting point of like the essence of the natural environment of this land beyond America and these constructs of countries and different things, like the land of this earth and the native people and society. And you just saw this like coming together, and that was really interesting experience for me because this place was so special and so sacred, and just seeing how commercialized it had been, and tourism and having Mount Rushmore there, and yeah, that experience was really interesting for me.
Yeah, it was really jarring actually to go and experience just the beauty of Yellowstone and all that was the nature in the pristine experience of God, and then to go and experience this national monument that was very much commercialized and very much a product of the system, and what that monument did to the surrounding town in terms of the tourism, and it lost its identity in many ways. But there was also a fragment that started waking up within me around the founding fathers around this time, and what the original vision was for the United States. And this started to plant a seed in the healing with this country for me, in that there was a really beautiful, grand vision for what America was meant to be. I mean, the United States, the land of the free, right? And then seeing what it actually has become now. And it just, yeah, up until this point, I would not have considered myself a patriot in any way, shape, or form. And this started to spark in me almost the sacred fire of what the founding fathers meant for this country. And we get to see that unfold a little bit more as we head to the east.
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. And here we are sitting in South Dakota, and we have this major decision point. We know that we are just at the point of no return. Geographically and spatially, if we keep going, we are in the east half of the country, and we're in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can't drive tow our house all the way out there and not do it. And so we called this the major decision point. We're at 35 of 51 national parks and 16 out of 48 states. So we're about a third of the way through the states, and we're sitting in this super sacred space, and we're like, all right, we go over to Sioux Falls, and we're like, what are we doing here? And God could not have been more clear to keep going. Don't give up, just keep going. And though we are pretty tired, and there's been no integration time, right? Like, even if we're moving on average every 2 to 3 days, and then occasionally we're telling you the long points, right? A week here, 2 weeks there, but in between that, we are moving. And we're tired, and we have not had time to integrate now the last, 8, 9, almost 10 months of this journey. And so our human selves did not want to keep going. Like, our human selves said, no, thank you. And actually, I just realized we never even shared the minor decision point, super magical experience we had.
Mm-hmm.
I think we shared it on this show way back then. But when we were in Portland and reaching that minor decision point of, are we going to keep going to this next little chunk? We went back to our New Thought Church in Portland, and we had this thing throughout the journey. We never told anyone. We never said it on this show. It was just our thing. And I don't even know where it came. It just came one day, where every time we would pack up, we had our whole system. We'd get in the car, we'd say a prayer, and then right before you would go and like put the car in drive, or right after you'd start driving, you would say, we are on the road again. And that was like our thing. And we go and, in Portland to church, we're sitting there and we're like, we are done. And this is the minor decision point. This is, early July. We're like, we are done. We just want to get our land. We hadn't received the news about the land yet. So why don't we just go park in NorCal in a park somewhere and sit and wait a month or two until we can get this land? And we go to church, and the minister is like, we're going to do something we've never done before. This church has been around for like 50 years, some ridiculous number, and we have a secret theme song, and we've never sung it in church before, and we're gonna do it. And on this massive screen, On the Road Again comes on, and everyone in this church starts singing it, and Eric and I are hysterically laughing because there's a sanctity to receiving signs in a church, I feel, and God was like literally telling us, get on the road again. And so we have that first one, and I don't even honestly remember what the second one was at the major decision point, but it was clear as day, and it was just a chance interaction. Someone said something, and I think it was like in a co-op or a grocery store in line, or maybe a crystal store. Someone said something, you should really go check out something on the east. And it was a synchronistic moment of like, okay, God, we hear you. We're going to keep going. So we decided to keep going. It's mid-August of last year, and we did a really intense thing.
Oof.
One of the most intense things I've ever done in my life. And I say that a lot, but like seriously, y'all, this was freaking intense. In 4 weeks, so from mid-August to, mid-September, we did 15 states and 3 Canada providences. You heard that right. 15 states and 3 Canada providences. I honestly can't even believe it. Like it was so intense. We could not breathe. It was go, 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 because we were trying to make it to the Northeast. So we're just blowing through the center of the country, which, I mean, to be fair, like, there's not really that much there, and so we go south, and then we go back up north to, like, Michigan, and then we go down and around Ohio, all those states, Illinois, Kansas. I'm trying to think of what they all are. Just that whole, like, north and central chunk of the country. So we just rapid fire it over to the Northeast. And we get there, and it's really interesting because on September 11th, here we are in the Northeast and really diving into this Founding Fathers history. And yeah, there was so much, like from Vermont to Maine to New York to the Amish to, getting over into, Pennsylvania and Philadelphia and Massachusetts and like the 13 core founding states. And there's so much to go through in here. We have several things we want to talk about, but that 4 weeks leading up to that was intense. I would not do that again. It was just so fast, but we were chasing the weather and catching time up, and we're like, we got to get over to the east if we're going to get this journey done before winter hits.
Yeah, and that's too, right, being in tune with the seasons and living in flow with Mother Nature. And we knew, we had taken time to really slow down and sit with the decision. And now it was time to really get on the saddle and ride over to the east. And a lot came through in that middle chunk around just going and making connections and seeing the country. But what really stood out to me, especially in that upper middle chunk of the country, was just how much the infrastructure of the cities of the U.S. are beginning to fail. We saw it a lot in Michigan. We saw a lot just around the Great Lakes and the highways, the cities. And it was a really stark moment of, oh, this country is not necessarily at its prime anymore. It's not what we're being told that it is and has been. And there's an opportunity for us as people of this country to really pioneer the reformation of what this country wants to be. And during this part of the journey, there was a lot of revelation around that. It really started to ignite, that little spark of fire that came from Mount Rushmore. Going through this part of the journey it really added fuel to that of, something needs to change. This is our home. This is our country. The people here are much more unified than we think that they are. And while the news and the media may want everybody to think that we're separate and divided, I can tell you, going and staying at these farms and staying with communities and speaking with people, there's this wholesomeness to the American community and our capacity to really rebuild if we focus and we come together. And that's what really, really ignited for me in the upper chunk of the country. And then moving up towards the upper eastern part, experiencing these foundational colonies of the Americas, it really reminded me, hey, there is a really beautiful foundation to this country here. There is a lot of incredible patriotism and strong principles that we can all lean on and rebuild from.
Yeah, that time in Minnesota and Michigan and Ohio and just that like general area up there and the center of the country too, I had a really interesting experience of, first of all, the Great Lakes are just beyond words. Like, I'd never seen them before, and they're aptly named, but that is just wow. It is just mind-bendingly large to see these Great Lakes. And Minnesota and, Michigan and some of these places like are beautiful. And you really see the harm that has been done due to the industrialization and having the ports there, especially. And yeah, just, I remember like hearing about like the whole Flint, Michigan water thing. When we were in Michigan, we had multiple incidences of not safe water quality coming out of what was claimed to be safe, tap water. And obviously we have incredibly high standards for our water, but when I'm showering and my body and my eyes are burning, that was really interesting. And, these were also several of the first places that we were guided by God not to enter into. So that included Chicago, that included Detroit. We were told, nope, don't go in those cities. And, there's a very powerful density to a lot of the cities up there. And yeah, it just was this very interesting mix of experiences leading up to New York. And New York, I think out of all of the states, New York was the most incredible and the most challenging. Like, it was beautiful. We absolutely loved spending time with the Amish. Niagara Falls was incredible. Mm-hmm. It was a really beautiful state. Like, when for me, my image of New York was New York City, which we'd been to before, and just seeing the whole state and driving, upstate New York and western New York and all these different places was really special. And we also had our first major breakdown, and we've also shared about this on the show before, but we were towing across the Brooklyn Bridge on Saturday at 3 p.m. in the rain. So just about every catalyst stressor that could be present, and our heater hose. We have theories of this being a very spiritual thing and being related to darkness, but that's just our theory. But our heater hose magically snapped off of our engine and all of our coolant drained as we were coming off the Brooklyn Bridge. And it was a really beautiful and stressful experience. We passed the test, we walked in faith and we got through that. But New York also, I think, was a big turning point. Prior to this, our relationship was in a really, I would say, good or neutral state. And heading into New York and the couple states right before it, we started to really enter a downswing. We talk a lot about this sine curve, up, down, and the lower you go, the higher you go. And it's just this consistent flow of relating where it's just not always in a high point. And we started to enter a low point. And with our patterns and your patterns and your addiction and just some different things, New York was really challenging. And I think there's a lot to be said about not only our state of being drained and moving so quickly, but also the density of a lot of these places we were going to really starting to have an effect on us. And so, yeah, New York was absolutely beautiful. Loved the Amish. Interesting towing your whole house to New York City and going from this frame of consciousness, riding the subways and meditating and sending light to these underground tunnels and these different things that are happening. That was a very interesting experience. And yeah, New York for me just felt very dualistic in the beauty and the challenges that state brought.
It was a really intense experience. And again, a major catalyst. And because we leaned into it so fully and wholeheartedly, the growth that came after was absolutely magical. I mean, walking into this city, before we visited as tourists to experience the city, and it felt this time around that we were going there on a mission, on a spiritual mission, to bring light and awareness and consciousness into the belly of the beast, if you will, and to be met at the gates of the city with this intense experience of breaking down, and then very quickly not allowing that to consume us, and trust in God and work together to very quickly shift out of it. And we were able to spend the rest of the trip in the state of consciousness of healing and being present with the mission that God asked us to do. And this really, after completing that experience and exiting New York and moving into New Jersey, this really kicked off a period of bliss for us in many ways, because we went through that downswing in relating with one another. We went into that density of the cities and alchemizing all that energy. And as the flow of life goes, God provided us with a really beautiful experience afterwards to really settle in and integrate and have some wonderful experiences.
Yeah, I realized we booped over the tiniest little boop of Vermont. And I just want to give some love to Vermont. Everyone told us like Vermont and New Hampshire were going to be some of our favorite places. And I can see why people love it. Here we are in the fall. So we just perfectly divinely, this whole trip, we got all the seasons and all the perfect places. But the maple syrup farm we stayed on and just different things. Vermont was awesome. It wasn't our place. And same thing with Maine, like beautiful state, Bar Harbor and Acadia. I was actually personally, Acadia was one of our least favorite parks. It didn't have the energy that some of the other ones did. So I just wanted to touch on those two places because they were beautiful. That whole like upper northeast section of the country, you really feel like you've left the US and you're kind of somewhere else. But moving past, New York and New Jersey, we started at this point asking the question, what are we doing when this is done? Because at this point we are, it's September, fall is arriving, and we know that we have only 3 months left in this journey. And, we're about 3/4 of the way through in terms of states and distance. And where are we going when we finish this? Like, what is the plan here? This land journey has gone on pause, and we can literally go anywhere in the US. And, really, where does God want us? And so we started asking that question. And Philadelphia happens. And in Philadelphia, we felt absolutely in love with Philly. And it was just so interesting falling in love with Pennsylvania and, being in Philly and asking this question. And this is the thing, y'all, when you set the intention and you ask and you are truly not only open to the answer, but also open to following the guidance and surrendering to divine will, God will deliver, and God will deliver loudly, my friends, because we said the prayer and the intention. Okay, God, 3 more months, we're finishing this thing out. Where are we going? And it was in Pennsylvania that it started. This pretty much didn't end, but multi-week, unbelievable floodgate of Austin signs. When I tell you that we stayed on Austin Street, we would call to book somewhere in New York. This is Austin speaking. Our favorite restaurant in Philly, which we're going to shout out our favorite restaurants at the end. You know, we're talking to the server, having this deep conversation about Freemasons, and then we ask him what his name is. Oh, my name's Austin. It didn't end, and it just kept going and going throughout our travels, and it was made abundantly clear to us that Austin was where we were heading. And we kept that close to our hearts for quite a while. We didn't really tell many people where we were ending up. We were really letting God guide the way and bring that. But Philly was incredible to see the history that's there and just put your feet, you know, there's a lot there. You can go down many rabbit holes of, you know, the Freemasons and just the Moors and the different views of the history of this country. And more than anything, Philly showed me that everything that was in the history books was a script, and it really opened my mind to, wow, like most of what everyone believes about this country, they learned in a school system designed by the Rockefellers. That's just this regurgitated book. But have you actually gone out and experienced DC and Philly and Boston and a lot of these different cities where these things happen? If you're into history at all, or politics, or leadership, or alternative living, or the Constitution, or any type of like new views on government and how societies arrange themselves, I highly recommend doing a history tour of those 13 founding states, because that was super powerful. After Philly, we had the most incredible experience of spending a week in Boston at the most beautiful state park, Wampatuck, with a spring there and being around some friends that live in Boston. And yeah, just really old city, really rich history. It feels like its own energy for sure. Boston is interesting. I see why people love it. It wasn't our place, but I see why people love it. And after leaving Boston, we end up in Maryland. And I realize I'm going a little out of order here from like New York to Boston to New York City and Philly and all these different things. We were going in a weird pattern and booping around. And so forgive me if it's out of order, but we make it through the whole Northeast and, you know, New York and Boston and Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, all these things. And we land in Maryland, and we have hands down the most epic experience of this trip. We were using, I've mentioned it before, Harvest Host, which is an app where farms and communities and businesses and museums and people sign up and let RVers stay there. And this was our most epic one. We stayed at Benji's Drive-In, and Benji's Drive-In is, I believe it has America's largest drive-in movie screen. And we literally towed in our 28-foot travel trailer and our Tahoe and parked in the back of this drive-in and watched drive-in movies from our house as you're making us snacks in our house. And then when it ended and everyone cleared out, we were alone all night in Benji's Drive-In. And you just can't make it up. It's so cool. And it was just such an epic experience. And it just felt really worth mentioning because we get asked a lot what our favorite experiences were. And that was peak there. And another one was, I believe it was in New York. I don't fully remember, but we got to stay at a flower farm. And the woman, you know, settles us in and then is like, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. And we're like, wait, you're leaving? And she's like, oh yeah, I don't live on the farm. And you'll see all these things on my Instagram highlights, but we literally had a flower farm to ourselves, and we had a bee farm to ourselves, and that whole chunk was just really cool places that we got to stay and see.
Yeah, it was truly a gift to be able to experience that, especially for our inner children, to be able to just sit in our house and watch drive-in movies together and, you know, have it not be so serious all the time, right? Bringing and reintroducing in a little bit of play and joy and levity to help alchemize some of the dense energies that we had just been experiencing. And so God does really just bring those magical experiences when we need that energy boost, and very grateful for that. You know, going and experiencing Philly was just, it was one of my favorite places. And the history there and just the landscape too, you know, going and visiting the Amish and experiencing how they're living more in unison with the land and just what's possible. Humanity is such a diverse species, and we are capable of so much beauty when we work together and have guiding principles around how we want to relate with one another and this earth. And yeah, I got to see a lot of what those foundational principles were meant to be for this country during that time. And then just brought back some joy into our life. I'm really grateful for that time period.
Yeah. And again, you're going to see how, if you zoom out with us here, like perfectly designed this journey was, right? We had 6 months of bliss, a really hard month, a couple months of bliss, a really hard couple of months of density, a month of joy, and just like having our inner children and all these cool experiences. And then the events came that came after that. And so we make it to Washington, D.C. area, and the hurricanes start hitting. And originally, our journey was to pretty much go from DC to Richmond and then, or to Asheville and then Richmond. I forget which way it was. And as we are right up there in, Maryland, Hurricane Helene hits. And yeah, we have an episode on that. I would really love to plug and invite you to please go check it out. I'm trying to find it right now. It is called A Call to Love for Asheville, and it is episode number 42. Here we are, obviously in no way related to the people actually living there, but here we are pretty profoundly affected by it. We are trapped because if you look at the map in that area, how all the highways had shut down, we can't get south. We are supposed to be going from Maryland through Virginia. We were literally just going to boop into the tip of West Virginia for the one national park and then go down to North Carolina, and we can't make it anymore. And we now have to reroute our whole route and are in the thick of this energy of what's happening, and at this point, we're really deep in the grid work. And I don't even think we consciously realized it's what we were doing. We were just treating this journey these last few months as a spiritual mission and, going and meditating and praying and giving our light to the land. And the concept of quote unquote grid work hadn't been introduced in that way to us, but we were doing it the whole journey. And so we're coming out of these really dense energies and then have these joyful experiences, make it to DC. Can't even touch on that because we're just going to get sucked into the deepest rabbit hole ever of what Washington, D.C. is and what came through there. But yeah, we have Hurricane Helene hit. And so we talk to each other, we talk to God, and we make a really profound decision to reroute and go around to West Virginia and go through Cincinnati and kind of do Kentucky and Tennessee. So instead of going south and then west, we go west and then east and south. And so we delay our time going to Asheville for a month. We completely reroute a month, and we end up doing West Virginia, Cincinnati, Kentucky, and Tennessee, and doing that leg before making the decision to actually go into the heart of this and spend a week in Asheville on the ground doing hurricane relief about 30 days after Helene hit. And so through that, West Virginia, Kentucky, we fell in love with Cincinnati. It was just really interesting to see these places like Nashville and, Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee is absolutely stunning. I think we could definitely live in Eastern Tennessee. And that's actually where some of my family's from. But there just was all these experiences and just starting to see these places that are really ravaged by the extreme weather America's been experiencing. And again, not going down these rabbit holes of whether or not climate change is real. We have opinions on that, but weather modification and just seeing like there is some very unnatural, we'll call it that. Causes could be debated for years. Unnatural weather that's happening in this area of the country, and seeing, Tennessee had just been flooded and, all these different areas. It was really impactful. And we're just kind of sitting and waiting and traveling, around this deeply catastrophic and painful spot in our country and just waiting for it to be clear enough to go in and do something.
Yeah, and I remember when we were in Kentucky, and we were at a loss of what to do because we were, I mean, it was right there. We could we could see on the news the destruction that was occurring. It was Everybody was talking about it. There was this energy of deep grief that was present in the country at the time, but especially in that region. These states are much smaller on the East Coast, and so a lot of people have family spread out along that region, and it felt like almost everybody that we interacted with was affected in some way. And we were driving, and I was processing this grief and this rage that was building up inside of me around, how could the government let this happen, right? All those narratives that were coming up around, we need to be doing more, we need to be helping more, why aren't people helping more? And I realized in that anger it wasn't about anything outside of me. It was about me. Why am I not doing more? Why am I not doing something about this? And we had a really powerful conversation on the drive to the grocery store, and made the decision to spend that time in Asheville and go and do that hurricane relief. And I would really encourage you to go and listen to episode 42 around the Asheville experience, because we dive really deep into some really powerful activations around what that experience taught us and how we have the capacity as any individual on this planet to really make a difference. And also some really powerful activations around gratitude and how we can alchemize these catalytic events into purpose, into stepping into our mission, and into following where God is leading us.
Yeah. Reply the gratitude. Check out episode 40. That whole time period was just really powerful, and seeing the way people responded. And to be really honest, looking back, this show in and of itself is an exercise and experiment of consciousness, because the Asheville episode was our worst performing episode ever.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody listened. And whether that's because they didn't have the space, there's no right or wrong or assumptions on why. There is this, I think, victimization consciousness that really is like, I can't do anything about it, or it's too painful for me to look at, or it's not my problem, or whatever the narrative is. We really got to see, both the profound sanctity of the community vibe in Appalachia, and how much the greater population just doesn't know what to do. And giving money is great, right? But in these moments, like, they're so complex, and we really need people to help. And so we went in, and that episode is there for you to check out. And I just want to, before we move on to going down to the Southeast, our last kind of, stops here were just Virginia and the Carolinas. And, Virginia is for lovers. It was one of our favorite states, top of our list, absolutely beautiful. Loved Richmond, just loved Appalachia. Like, if we had to pick 3 areas that we would want to live in and steward land in, it's actually Virginia, Northern California, and Texas were like our top spots. Mm-hmm. And so cannot shout out Virginia enough. Shenandoah, we got to see the Northern Lights in Virginia.
Yeah, that was really cool.
And the Northern Lights are God. They are God. I mean, everything is God, but like, being under them and being charged by them and communing physically, spiritually, with your eyes, with these lights. We've seen them before in Iceland, but it was the most profound sign from God of like, I'm here. I'm getting emotional. I'm here. I'm in this place. I'm with you. There is meaning in this, and this place is beautiful, and it will recover. That community is so special. The Carolinas, we got to see all the beaches, Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Virginia Beach, just really going down that coast and seeing really interesting places that I think are kind of very unique. They're not like the North or the Northeast, and they're not like the South and the Southeast. They're kind of just like their own little pocket there, which led us into Georgia. And, Georgia was very interesting. We had a massive breakdown. Our rear differential went out, and we absolutely fell in love with Savannah. I cannot recommend Savannah enough.
Mm.
Oh, those oak trees. There's some videos of us just like riding our bikes around Savannah because we literally had to because we didn't have our car. But it just, what a place to be stranded. Honestly, it could not have been in a more perfect spot. And we ended up having to drive an hour out of the city and stay on a farm near this differential place that could help us because no one in Savannah could. And just seeing the second wave of devastation, because everyone talks about Asheville, and Georgia was hit really hard by Helene. And so just seeing the devastation and the flooding and what Georgia went through, it was another opportunity to really be present with these people in this land and help bring some love and some consciousness to a community that, got hit and then got hit again by the next hurricane.
Whew, yeah, this seeing the impact of what one storm caused across several states was a big exercise in witnessing and just bearing witness consciously to people's grief and people's experience. And there was a healing that was occurring in us sitting and talking with people and sharing meals and sharing space. And it really activated within me the capacity to hold space for other people. And it was a big lesson in learning how to not shy away from the destruction of the world, not shy away from, challenging moments, but rather to really lean in with an open heart and to love the experience and express gratitude and help other people alchemize the grief and the pain that they're experiencing and return to a state of love.
You touched on something really powerful when you talked about holding space. And we haven't talked about, these last few weeks and some of the trips we've been on, because we're really integrating a lot of these activations around leadership. But we had an experience with someone who was talking to us about, how basically they had been quote unquote awake longer, and they had held space for people, hundreds or thousands of people in holding events, and we hadn't done that, and so we hadn't received those activations. And something really powerful that came from this time was that activation of sitting there and working, Red Cross disaster relief booth, 10 hours a day for 5 days straight, and holding space for people who are going through one of the greatest tragedies we will probably ever witness in our lives. Like, you really can't conceptualize it if you're not there. And the reason I share this is I really want to offer an encouragement that as you walk through your life, it can be really easy to think, I don't have leadership experience, or I don't have this experience, or I haven't experienced this or this or that. God uses everything, and God will activate you exactly as you need to be activated in the perfect order for what you're here to do. Because holding space, we see this a lot in the spiritual space. We've actually had this said to us several times. I've held space in a container, in an event for people this many times or for this many years. And it's this, well-intentioned thought of the ego that, like, if you haven't been in this specific role, then you don't have that specific skill. And I just want to shatter that and really encourage you, if you feel like, well, I don't have skills or I don't have things, look at your life, because your challenges and your lessons, those are your skills. Those are your activations. For example, like when I was getting into leadership in fintech, I thought, I don't have any leadership experience. And I had a beautiful manager and friends at the time who helped me see, yes, I did. I had a ton of leadership experience. Being a sponsor in a 12-step program, being a case manager of 50 houseless individuals, talk about leadership. And so really encouraging you, look at your life, look at your gifts, look at your skills, look at your challenges, because those hold the alchemical magic. It's not what school you went to, or how many years you've been awake, or how many years you've been, in something, or what degrees or accolades you have. It is the life experience. That is what God cares about, and that is what serves you in the end. And I can't wait until we see this radical shift in human consciousness where we quit labeling people experts and outsourcing our power to people who have quote unquote experience and degrees and knowledge, and we start remembering that it's wisdom and life that makes leaders and makes people to change the world. So no matter what you've been through in your life, you have the capacity to change the world. Moving into our last chunk here, we spent 2 weeks in Florida, another massive state, and another state that was ravaged by these hurricanes. And so pretty much the whole rest of this journey, we are just spending, like 3 months in this area of the country that has just been devastated by these hurricanes. And, Florida was incredible. I think you had been before. But driving the entire state, we went all the way down the right side and then all the way up the left side, and, got to spend some really amazing time there. We had a lot of friends there that we got to see the national parks and the springs and, communities there. And Sarasota, we have to shout out Sarasota. Wow. And the Everglades, you can't go wrong seeing the Everglades. But this was it. This was the end. We made it to this last little kind of corner of the country and spent these 2 weeks in Florida and then started our 1 week trek home. Because at this point, God could not have been louder. It was Austin. And so we drive through Alabama, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and we have officially seen all 48 states and all the national parks. Our last park was Hot Springs in Arkansas. Very disappointing park. They have literally commercialized it and turned it into chlorinated bathhouses that you have to pay to get into. So we didn't do that, but just making this trek back to Austin and driving home and just realizing we did it, 13 months, and I don't even know how we could possibly touch on all of it. In these 3 episodes, we've done our best. There's so much more, I'm sure, that we've missed. So if you go back, this podcast started right before we hit the road in Portland. And so the whole thing is documented there. And it's just this magical, 2-year journey of, just magic, absolute magic, pain, struggle, triumph, grid work, activations, community, history, shedding, death and rebirth, density, challenges, sovereignty, freedom, love. Like, how do you describe what this journey was?
If I had to distill it down, I would say it was an exodus of death and rebirth to find love again, to find God again, and to heal. And in that healing purpose, in that healing process, there was this shift that happened where we were no longer healing. We were stepping into purpose. We were stepping into service, because there's this natural progression that happens when we heal and we return to love within ourselves. We return to that unity consciousness and reconnect with God and nature, where the next step is just to be of service. It's all the heart and the soul wants to do, because once you've healed that personal experience and the pain that is running the show for a while and leading people to be on autopilot, in that stillness and in that quiet, there's just this undeniable urge to jump right back into the fire and help our brothers and sisters who are experiencing that, and to show that there is another way of life, a life filled with love and a life filled with purpose.
Yeah, I realized on Asheville we didn't mention the floods here in Texas right now, and it's so interesting, being so close and feeling it spiritually, just as a person, that we all feel it when we hear about it, but physically being in proximity to what is going on here in Texas right now with these floods. And my first instinct this morning, now that we've passed 3 days of nonstop rain, I looked at you and I was like, I want to go help. Like, I know this, I've done this, like, I know how this works. They're going to wait for the waters to recede, leave body recovery mode, and they will move into, physical recovery mode. The Red Cross will come in, and I want to go help. I'm here, I could do it. And I can't think of any better way to spend my time. And so Yeah, you nailed it. We could not have been given a better title for this series, this three-part series of a revelation, an exodus, these beautiful words. And I would even argue now making it to Austin was like this new genesis, this new
Mm-hmm.
beginning of building this heaven on earth, Eden on earth, whatever you want to call it, new world. It doesn't matter. It's love. It's God and it's love. That's all that there is, friends. It's that simple. It's that profound. It's that beautiful. It's God and it's love. And when we stripped away everything and we saw this entire country and we went through these experiences, there was just nothing in the end other than God. You just have to rely on God, and you have to go with God, and you have to trust God, and you have to be in union with God to receive the right guidance and signs and be divinely protected and be divinely guided. And it's all love. Love is the answer. And if there's one thing that I know more than anything in my life on a soul level, it's God and love. And that love is how we get out of this. There's no amount of solutions or money or disclosure or sovereignty that is going to fix this. It's just love. Something that we really wanted to share with y'all was our lists of places and some cool things, and the pennies, the pressed pennies. You can see them on those Instagram highlights, but we really decided, stickers fade and other stuff is stuff, right? And it's expensive and it takes space and it's just stuff. And so we collected pressed pennies throughout this. And our whole banister in our RV slide out is, I don't know how many you think there are.
There's a lot.
Hundreds. There's a lot of them, of pressed pennies, because they're only 51 cents. And now we have this visual artwork of this representation of this journey, and we have some really cool pennies. We actually just got one while your parents were here. It says, "And on the 8th day, God made Texas." It might be my new favorite penny. But our list of favorites. So one that we really want to shout out is restaurants, because we are, as you all know, plant-based, organic, as raw as possible, and zero wiggle room on our willingness to compromise that, and specifically organic and conscious. And so every chance we got to try some of the healthiest and most conscious restaurants in the country, we took it. And we can confidently say that we have tried the best and most healthy and most conscious restaurants in America. And so there are 6 of them here. There is Peace Pies in San Diego.
Very good.
Very good. All raw, exquisite. Chocolatry in Sedona. Just gonna let that one sit on my tongue for a minute. It's the best food. There's Breads on Oak in New Orleans. Wow, y'all. Might be at the top of the list. Casa de Luz here in Austin. Absolutely exquisite place. A theme with a lot of these restaurants is they're not just restaurants. They're hubs for consciousness. They have conscious products and other businesses attached. And it's just amazing to see these popping up. And Casa de Luz here in Austin is a perfect example of that. There's Nourish in Philly and Ione in Sarasota. These 6 restaurants, we got to meet the owners or interact with the owners in almost all of these. I think all but 1 or 2 of them. Exquisite human beings making food with love that is healthy, and being in union with the earth, and just seeing that this is the exquisiteness of what humanity can create when we are creating with intention and with health and love in mind. So that was that. Our places that we loved.
I mean, NorCal and Redding area is so important to us. Yeah, I mean, the Redwoods couldn't have been a more beautiful start to the journey. And in many ways, that has been our home in our hearts for a long time. Virginia was absolutely beautiful. East Tennessee, Pennsylvania, Austin and East Texas, Minneapolis, Philly, Cincinnati, Asheville, and really all of Appalachia, and Sarasota in Florida. I mean, these are all incredible spaces, and it was so interesting because when we left
I'm
Portland...
realizing Savannah wasn't on there.
Oh, yes, and Savannah.
Cannot forget
we
Savannah.
Can't forget Savannah. We realized, we left on this journey with the intent to find one spot to steward land, right? This was going to be our one spot in the US that we were going to call home, and we were only going to fall in love with one spot. And on this journey, I realized this is a really beautiful and diverse country. There's so much amazing land here and people here and communities that we didn't leave this journey with one spot to call home, but several places that we fell in love with.
It's the perfect segue into our closing section here. We're almost done, of shattering untrue narratives and programming about this country and accepting realities about the state of this country. So we're going to dualistically address both of these sides here. There's going to be some, I think, uncomfortable truths in this. And as usual, we invite you to sit with it, be in this container of love with us. If any triggers come up, that is a good thing. It's a sign that there's something in there, some resistance or some attachment or, some lack or fear that is asking to be transmuted and loved. And so we share this as our opinions, our humble opinions, having seen almost 50,000 miles in all 48 states during an election year, of what we noticed. And so first starting with, accepting some of the, actually, let's go the other way, shattering the untrue narratives and programming about this country. Mm-hmm. Turn off the news, y'all. But if you watch the news, it's just seeing it, like literally driving. Let me start with this disclaimer. We are not political. We do not identify with a party. We do not do politics. We do not believe in giving our power away to leaders. The leaders are not going to save us. It is a very, very, very deep hole, the political system. And you would have to go very, very deep beyond the mainstream narratives to get to the truth. And even then, who knows? So with that disclaimer, it was an election year. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And here we are driving literally 40,000 plus miles of this country, all the major cities, except for the few God told us to stay out of. And, honestly, y'all, there's no way to say it. 90%, if I had to put a number on it quantitatively, of the signs that we saw, and I'm talking, we weren't just like driving the cities. We're driving rural America. We're staying on farms, back roads, highways, coast to coast, you name it. 90% of the signs we saw were for Trump. And you could argue there's other reasons for that. Trump supporters are really loud and proud, whatever it may be, but it just was really shocking and kind of confusing, right? Because you have this mainstream narrative where they say like, nobody likes this man and all this different things. And then you get out there to the people and you see a really large support and following for this candidate. And so that was really interesting to see, just how what we were seeing on the news was not matching what we were seeing in the country. When people live in the cities, these like really dense pockets that's like sometimes one thousandth or more of a state, you get a really warped perception of like what else is out there. And so just noting that it was really interesting, which leads into the second point about overpopulation. Just these narratives they feed us, like global warming and overpopulation and different things. We were able to really see like there is so much land here and there are so many people who love each other and realize it doesn't matter what political candidate you support. We are we the people, and we the people have become infected and brainwashed by the political system to forget what we the people originally meant. And so just really like breaking our minds open to physically be on the ground for 13 months and watch whatever the news would be saying in any state. It didn't matter. Whatever the news was saying was going on there. And then to experience it firsthand physically and realize literally everything on the news is a lie.
We had multiple moments of this throughout our journey where it really shattered the perception of what the media complex is. Living in Portland, Oregon for as long as we did, the belief in myself, in the far left movement, and really wholeheartedly believing that was the right thing to do. That was the loving party, I was very much in the far left, and I had all these preconceptions and notions on what Republicans were, right? And this conservative party that, doesn't believe in love or care about people. And driving out there and talking to people, I realized, oh no, that's not true. That's just not true. Actually, there is no left and there is no right. We are all just people in this country who, when you boil it down beyond the colors and the political beliefs, everybody here is a child of God. And, the media really wants us to live in this state of separation so that we're fighting each other and fighting a system instead of being present with ourselves and healing and building community and living our purpose. And when we traveled to Asheville and were experiencing firsthand the devastation and then seeing how quickly the news moved on, or was making it seem that the relief provided by the government was doing so much, and we were there at this Red Cross station where the federal aid was supposed to be there, and they weren't there. They weren't showing up. They weren't providing aid for people, and people who were there looking for aid were many times getting denied aid. And it was just this, wrecking ball moment of the news is not the news. We have to rely on each other. Back in the day, people talked with another and really came in together in community. And now you see a lot of people outsourcing their information to the news media and the television, and so much of people's perceptions of the world aren't actually our perceptions. They're what we're told to us.
You nailed it. I was just about to say, if I could give you one piece of advice, having seen the entire country, question everything. Because you think that you know something, right? And then if I were to ask you, for example, you say, oh, this is what happened in the, American Revolution. Well, how do you know that? Oh, well, because I learned it in a history book. Okay, well, how do you know that that's true? Have you gone and done your own research and alternative resources, going into these old ancient texts, much of which they hide from us? So that's a really good indicator that they're not being fully truthful, right? Like these narratives, around things like the Holocaust is a great example. Like our history has been altered and much has been repressed and hidden from us. The Vatican archives are a great example. And so just going out and seeing, especially in America, because America really is kind of the heart of the global economy and the global narrative and our Constitution, and just getting really deep and asking questions. Just be curious like a child. The last part here is accepting realities about the state of this country. You started on the infrastructure earlier. I don't think we need to go super deep in, other than it just is what it is. Our infrastructure is in deep need of love, from our power infrastructure to our highway infrastructure, the water systems. Oh my gosh, so many places we went just had horrendous water quality. We just couldn't even stand to shower in it because it just was like so obvious to us. Federal standards of healthy water is unhealthy, and that's just the reality of it. And then you have some of these places like Michigan and a few others that, yeah, it was really intense. And just seeing the way that these mass weather events, these unnatural events, whatever the causes are, that's not what this show's about, were affecting this country. And, we can barely even start to rebuild from one before three more hit, Texas being a great example. The other thing we really wanted to mention here was mass farming and mass animal farming, because these are very intentionally hid away from the cities. They are very intentionally put on back roads where no one's going to see them. And we got to see them and smell them from miles away. And just seeing the devastation that is happening to our soil. This is where regenerative agriculture comes in. You can look into things like Kiss the Ground and different organizations, but we got to see firsthand 40,000 miles plus of farmland that is not in good health, is not in a good state. And just this very unnatural way of stewarding the land and the animals. And yeah, that was really, really challenging to see, because there's a reason these farms are so far out of the city. And just seeing the spraying of the pesticides and just seeing the mass production of soy and corn and different crops, that make a ton of money and can be exported. That was really challenging. And I think really too, just to round out these 2 points, it's if you have not personally seen something, and I'm not talking about seeing it on the news or even seen it on Google or seen it in your own research. I mean, physically, if you have not with your own eyes witnessed that history or read those books or talked to those people or been on the ground, you don't know. And it was the most humbling experience for me traveling this country because I thought I knew. I was the typical American. Like, I know the history books. I know what California's like. I know what New York is like. I know these things. I know. And this trip showed me I don't know anything. I don't know anything. And even having seen it now, I'm more aware that I still don't know anything. But what I do know is question everything. We are all way more connected than we are separated. And God is our pathway out, and love is how we get there.
I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. Humanity is just so resilient, and we have the capacity to really make a difference, not only in each other's lives, but in this planet. When we come together in community, I mean, it's unstoppable what we can do, what we can create, the beauty of people living in their purpose and in their mission, seeing the exquisiteness of some of these restaurants and marketplaces and just what people who are fully living in their purpose are able to create. Imagine a society where everybody is living in their purpose. Just the beauty that can be built from that. And I have so much faith in this country now. I have so much faith in us as humanity. And, seeing all of this and being lucid to the opportunities for growth in this country and in this world, and then walking that path for ourselves and doing the healing work and stepping into our own purpose, it really demystified the experience for me and helped me realize, yeah, no, anybody can do it. Anybody can do it. You can do this. We definitely took an extreme route, and I know that every person has the capacity to choose love at any moment and to realign themselves with divine will and to surrender and find God and find themselves, and what that would mean for the world if just you did this today. You made that commitment to embarking on this journey and really finding love and meaning and purpose and radiating that out into the world. We've seen the impact that it has had in just our local community of us living the way that we're living. And I can only imagine what 10 more people, what 100 more people, 1,000, 1,000,000 people living in a state of love and grace would do for this world. And I just want to remind you that you're not alone. There's so many people waking up in this country and choosing to live a different life. And we're connected through that energy that connects all of us through God. And even if it feels like you're alone and that there isn't anybody in your direct community that's experiencing that, that means you're the first one to wake up there. You're the one to lead the charge. And so many people will rise up with you when you walk in that leadership.
Absolutely. We could go on and on and on for years, for eons of who is they, who's responsible, all these different rabbit holes, all these different secret societies, all these different things. What is the solution? We could drive ourselves mad. And in the end, it's so simple. The only way that you are controllable, that you are outside of your power, is when you are in a state of fear, is when you are in a state of separation and victimization and anger and resentment. They, whatever it is, call it the enemy, the secret societies, the cabal, Satan, it doesn't matter what you want to call it. Know the power of humans. We are the most powerful thing. We hold the presence of God within us. We hold the capacity, just like our sacred brother Jesus, to perform miracles, to heal ourselves, to build new worlds, to overnight create something new. And when you step into that, and here's the most important thing, it doesn't matter how you get there. And anyone who's telling you that it does, you have to go this route, you have to go the sovereignty route, you have to go this spiritual route, this religion, that is the problem. How you get there doesn't matter. We love and encourage and welcome all paths that lead to true, authentic, embodied awareness, healing, and love. Whatever you do, do it so fully that you are drowning in consciousness and awareness. Do it so fully that you are healing in the depths of your soul to bring your full, true soul purpose essence into this world. And do it with love. Because as long as you do those three things, the proverb of loving consciously, of this mission, of this journey, keep awakening, keep healing, and keep loving. That's how you take your power back. That's how we build the new world of love.
That was absolutely beautiful. We are so grateful to have you here with us on this journey as we continue to grow and expand and navigate our purpose. We are here to support you on yours. We love you so much, and I just have so much faith. I have faith in all of us and what we are going to create together, because with God on our side and love in our hearts, there is nothing too dark for us to illuminate with love.
Another beautiful episode. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We invite you to check out our website. It just continues to grow and expand. We have launched our coaching offerings. It is open to everyone, single, individual, family, solo. If you want to work with me or Eric or both of us, we are launching that, and really in this foundational period of being open to stepping into that container. We also have our partners, several amazing partners and brands that we've partnered with this show. So lovingconsciously.com, you'll find all the different things there, all the episodes we mentioned today. We recently rebuilt our podcast page to separate them by category. You, of course, can find all of our episodes everywhere you stream. We would love it so much if you would share these episodes with people, help get this message of love out there, and help us create the new world, because that's how we do it. There's only one way we're going, friends, and it's together, because we are one united family. We are one, and we go together. So keep awakening, keep healing, keep loving, and we will see you all here soon.